I did the night shift at a gas station because I was strapped for cash and needed a second job. I worked the night shift there for a few months. It was around my second or third month that this guy started regularly coming in, really late at night, always around 2 a.m. He was about 6 feet tall. He had long, stringy hair. He'd always come in by a tall boy and leave. But after a while, he one night asked me my name. I told him my name, and he just kept saying, "Rob, I like that." As he'd laughed to himself, he cracked open the tall boy he just bought and walked out of the store talking to himself. He was clearly hammered. This was the night. I was curious to see if he had been drinking and driving every single time that he'd come to the store. I watched as he left and he walked out of sight off the gas station property. That would make sense. He never once bought gas anytime he came in. He'd always just buy alcohol. I'd seen him just about every night after that for a while. He'd come in some nights noticeably drunker than others, and sometimes he'd just lean on one of the shelves for a while and not say anything. He'd always greet me with a hayrod anytime he'd come in. One night he was just leaning on a shelf drinking the all-boy he just bought, not saying anything, just staring at a wall. I asked him for his name. Finally, he looked at me, took about 5 seconds and said, "Bob." Now I always felt like Bob is a go-to fake name when you're lying about your name. I wondered if the first thing that came to mind for him was Bob, because it rhymes with my name. But I went with it. I said, "So Bob, where do you work?" He laughed so loud it actually startled me. He said he doesn't work. He said the government completely him out of his job. I got the vibe he was Wested. Again. He looked at me with an angry-looking face, but interestingly said, "I like you, Rob. You seem like you know what you're doing." I didn't know what that meant, but he walked out of the store. Right after that, I didn't see him again for a while. I'd say over a week passed, which for a regular like him was a while. Bob always gave me this off-mildly creepy vibe. I figured he was usually drunk, but something was obviously wrong in his personal life. Well, one very stormy night with less customers than usual, likely because of the storm, I heard the ding of the front door as someone entered, and I swear before looking, I imagined it to be Bob. And when I looked, I was shocked to see it was actually him. But it was a much scarier version of Bob. He was completely soaked. He wasn't wearing a rain jacket or using an umbrella. He was just in a dark shirt and jeans. His long hair was drenched, and he was just standing by the door looking straight ahead at the wall. He looked like he was angry, and yet his mind was elsewhere. Like his thoughts were running the way he was standing there blankly staring at nothing, completely soaked. It was freaking me out. I said, "Bob, are you okay?" He didn't turn his head or move. He stood still and said, "I did something really bad." I asked, "What did you do?" He then looked at me, said, "I need somewhere to hide," then walked past me at the register towards the little restroom hallway. He disappeared behind the wall, and I heard one of the doors open and close. I was genuinely getting uncomfortable with Bob now. I didn't enjoy his presence whenever he was in the store, and tonight something was extra off about him. He seemed like a zombie, and that I did something really bad. Comment was incredibly creepy. Some time passed and Bob never came out from the bathroom. I assumed he was wasted again, probably passed out or puking, either way. I didn't want to intervene. And then the next thing I remember, the lights to the place cut out, and the store was completely dark. I was standing in a pitch-dark gas station during a major storm with an unhinged drunk man. I used the flashlight from behind the counter to make my way towards the back of the store by the inventory storage and the panel board. The door to the back was in the same little hallway as the restrooms as I walked by the 2 restroom doors. Both of them were ajar, and Bob wasn't in either of them. I went through the door to the back. I was planning on going straight to the panel board, but I stopped when I heard a slight dripping in the room somewhere and the squeaking of wet shoes. My heart sank into my stomach. I said, "Bob," in a very weak and scared voice. I heard squeaks right to my left when I pointed my flashlight in that corner. There was Bob with his eyes opened wide, and he lunged at me and started screaming, "I'm gonna kill you." I pushed him off of me as he was clawing at my back. I ran back through the door to the front of the store. He didn't follow me. I grabbed my rain jacket and ran straight to my car. I sat in my car as I dialed 911 and spoke to an operator. I stayed on the line with her, and it didn't take long for a couple police officers to arrive and go inside with me. Bob was still hiding in the back room, huddled in a corner. Apparently, like some rabid creature, pupils were huge. I only noticed it. Then he was on something. They took him to the station after I told them that he lunged at me, threatened to kill me, and stated that he did something really bad earlier. I found out over a month later that this Bob guy's real name was Martin. He had brutally beaten his ex-wife to death. It might have happened on that same night that he came into the gas station. Long story short, I never wanted to work another night shift, had any job ever again after this night. Slit your throat as some people came out of their houses. He started to run away down the street. I didn't chase after him. A couple people came over to me and asked if I was all right, and I told them how a stranger was in my back seat by now. The guy was out of sight. I wasn't about to start driving around after a crackhead. I thanked the people who came out and continued my drive home, making sure I didn't see him anywhere. The rest of the drive, that was the scariest experience of my life. This event happened in the mid-60s in the Atlanta area. At that time, I was about 8 or 9 years old. My father taught school in the suburb of Atlanta that was some distance from where our home was located. I went to the same school where he taught, so I rode with him every day. However, we had to get up very early each morning and head out before the sun was up. We always stopped several mornings each week to top off on gas at a small independent station. We were often the first car there shortly after the station opened in those days. Everything was full service. There was a booth with an attendant who would come out and fill your tank, wash your windows, etc. He would always be carrying a lot of bills in his pocket and a device on his belt from which he counted out coins. Behind the pumps were tiny bathrooms. I would often use the bathroom on mornings that we stopped there. As it was a fairly long drive, one morning we again arrived before dawn to find the station completely deserted. It was totally quiet, other than the traffic sounds going by. There was no sign of an attendance either in the booth or anywhere else around the station. My father blew the car horn once, then again a few more times. But there was no response. We discussed what might be the problem. My father first suggested that perhaps the attendant might be in the bathroom. But when he still did not appear, my father said that maybe the attendant had experienced car trouble and had not been able to make it to work on time. We continued to wait for several minutes. No other cars pulled in. I told my father I needed to use the bathroom and put my hand on the car door handle to get out. But he told me that we could not wait any longer, and I could use the bathroom at the next station we came to. So we left, still wondering what happened. A day or two later, my father was reading the local newspaper when I heard a loud exclamation from him. He excitedly told my mother and I about a small article which stated that the body of a gas station attendant had been discovered with multiple stabs stuffed into the men's bathroom of the station. It was the station we always went to. The article said the motive appeared to be robbery, as all cash and coins were missing early in the morning. The total amount of money was probably not a lot. The article gave no hint as to what amount was taken. But either way, that didn't stop the killer. I've often wondered how I would have been affected at that young age if I had insisted on going to the bathroom at that station and had opened the door to discover the body of the murdered attendant. We never went to that gas station again. Growing up as a girl, I've always been told to be cautious. It didn't matter if I was going to the mall or leaving from work. I've always kept my eyes peeled for anyone acting strange or out of the ordinary. Although nothing had happened to me while doing these everyday tasks, the scary idea of getting kidnapped or worse has always been at the back of my mind. Since I was around 16, I've carried at the very least a pocket knife and mace with me wherever I go, just to be on the safe side. My mom was the one that instilled this paranoia in me. I'm not saying I didn't appreciate it. I'm sure it saved me a couple of times without me realizing it, but I can't go anywhere now without seeing a potential predator. It's not just men either. I think this way about both men and women, thanks to the internet. Seeing scary videos and stories about couples trying to bait teenage girls to their cars and homes has just pushed this paranoia further and further. In a strange way, I'm glad it did. Getting gas at night was something I did often, which went against basically everything I was taught. But sometimes I forgot to get it earlier in the day, and I just didn't have any other choice. Last night was one of those nights. I remember the price, $3.96 a gallon, and $3.93 after my rewards. I was close to an empty tank and I had the money to fill it up, so I just decided to go until it was full. For some reason, the pump was going pretty slow, but I wasn't in too much of a rush. I just sat against the side of the truck, watching the price on the screen climb higher and higher. There was a slight breeze and the air was cold, but not cold enough that a hoodie wouldn't keep me warm. I unlocked the truck and grabbed my hoodie from the back seat, making sure that I didn't fully turn my back towards the empty parking lot. Once I closed the door, I could barely see a glimpse of my reflection in the back window. It wasn't only me in the reflection, though. With my pocket knife in my hand, I turned back toward the pump. Not too far away, maybe about 6 feet, was a man. He looked normal, but also a little beat up, you could say. Not by a person, but by the elements. His clothes were torn and soiled, and his hair sat on his head, matted and coated white with dandruff. Other than that, he seemed like any other guy, just too close to a teenage girl for comfort. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping a straight face. I didn't want to smile, to look too friendly. "Got any cash?" He gave me a slight smile, just enough to show his dark and rotting teeth. I tried not to react. Just because I didn't want to look friendly doesn't mean I wanted to seem rude either. "No, I don't. I'm using the last of what I have to fill up. I had some spare bills in my truck, but to be honest, I've never given any money to homeless people. Sounds harsh, I'm sure, but it's better to keep your distance. You never know how they might react, depending on what you give them. Plus, I didn't want to turn my back on this guy to get anything out of the car." I see. Sorry to bother you then." I figured after that, he would walk away. Maybe he'd try and find a busier area with more people to get money from. But he didn't move, didn't even blink. He just stood there staring at me. I just stared back. We probably held eye contact for a good 10 seconds before he decided to turn around and make his way back to wherever he came from. He had a slight limp from his left leg, and I could see the soles of his shoes rubbing off. I started to wonder if I should have just given him the change. The pump finally finished, after what felt like an eternity of waiting, and I put it back in its holding spot. At this moment, I felt uneasy and kind of tense. He didn't seem dangerous, but the fact that I couldn't see where the man wandered off made me uncomfortable. In fact, I really couldn't see anything. The 2 streetlights and a few flashing bulbs near the front of the gas station didn't provide me with much to go off of, and noticing this just made me more freaked out. I had a feeling I needed to get into the car and fast. I hopped in the front seat, locked the car doors, and checked the back to make sure there was no one back there. Empty, thank God. I turned around to face the windshield and literally almost pissed myself. The man was back, but he wasn't alone. Next to him, not even 2 feet away from the front of my truck, was a woman. She was small, maybe malnourished and underfed, and had the scariest smile on her face I'd ever seen. Her teeth were worse than the man's, even though there weren't many in her mouth to see. I assumed that they were not only homeless, but on some type of drugs as well. It would explain not only the freaky behavior I was witnessing, but their appearance as well. I could barely grasp my key in my hands from shaking, but I managed to start the truck. I turned on the headlights and honked at the pair. Nothing. They didn't move. They didn't try to talk. They just had the same smiles on their faces, menacing and sinister. My chest started to hurt. I knew I wasn't having a heart attack, but God, it felt like I could. As I moved the gear shift to reverse, I saw the woman hold something up from my peripheral. I was almost too scared to look, and honestly, I wish I never did. The nose on the girl's head she was holding was missing. It didn't look like natural decomposition, not even close. Ripped skin surrounded what I assumed was broken cartilage, and I could tell that her nose was bitten off. Her eye sockets were hollow, and God only knows what they did with her eyeballs. Frozen in fear, all I could do was watch as she ripped the teeth from the girl's lifeless head, placing them one by one in her own mouth. I saw the blood starting to ooze from her gums as she forced them into the sockets. The man just stood and watched her, his gaze not departing from her. At this point, I was ready to throw up, but I also couldn't look away. I knew I needed to get help. I grabbed my phone without looking away from the couple and called the police, reversing my truck and driving off on the road in the process. By the time they asked me what the emergency was, I was in hysterics, snot and tears dripping from my face. I doubt they could understand much of what I was saying, but they at least got the location, and that's all that mattered. I'm not really sure what happened after that. I didn't really provide any identifiable information about myself, just what I could explain to the dispatcher about what I saw, what I wish I didn't see. I've had a nightmare about it every night since then. I've had my own teeth ripped out, saw the woman staring at me through my window with a bloody smile, and thought I was waking up to the man in my room watching me sleep. I don't know if this is something I'll ever get over. If only I could forget it. But I know one thing for certain now. I'll only be getting gas when the sun is up. Never during the night again. I don't want my eyeless, toothless head to be the next one found, all because I wanted to fuel up late at night. I caution you all to do the same as me and avoid it. At the very least, carry something to protect yourself. Maybe something stronger than mace or a pocket knife. Who knows what good that would have done for me had I needed it. Most importantly, though, keep your head on a swivel, because if you don't, I guess you never know where your head will end up next.